Final Fantasy IX was a landmark release that signaled the end of Square's major efforts on the PlayStation 1. It was one of the most visually and technically advanced RPGs on that console and a massive critical success. One only bested by Gran Turismo, Tekken 3, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, the second best game of all time. I can agree with that. It's an amalgamation of everything Final Fantasy had grown to represent prior to its release, and frankly, the final package is one of, if not my favorite video games of all time. But if you watched my previous video, Final Fantasy IX Deserves More, you already know that. So this time, we're gonna be doing something a little different. It's spoiler town up in here, cause I'm gonna be shredding this game to pieces. Nitpicks, issues, story beats, theories, ships, Baby Yoda, it's Final Fantasy IX exposed. So yo, it's Austin, and I know I said 1 week, I know it's been 2 months, but look, this game's thick. So let me go ahead and reintroduce Final Fantasy IX. It's not very often that I think a game needs more than 20 minutes of discussion, but here we are. We tackled all the basics last time, Zidane and Tantalus's plot to kidnap Princess Garnet, the slower-paced combat system, the general gist of the main cast, and some little moments shared by main characters. Like that one time Zidane and Vivi peed together, the important stuff, you know? Let's start where we left off, a crashed ship in the middle of a forest surrounded by mist. Cause you know, everything went 100% according to plan. Zidane and Vivi chase after Garnet, who thinks she's tough shit now, only to get immediately like semi-vored by a weird plant creature. Good start. So of course you run after her, but not before character development. You stay. Vivi and Steiner, our Shrekly knight, immediately get poisoned, so Zidane takes them back to safety and antidotes. Now, the Tantalus has completely failed their mission at this point. We were supposed to kidnap the princess, but all we did instead was just drop her off in the middle of an evil, cursed forest. Zidane, realizing he just participated in the worst first date ever, decides he has to completely ditch his life as a thief, fight the boss man to earn his freedom, and follow pretty girl. Yeah, he's not very bright and says things like, I'm gonna get me a sweetie pie. But Zidane shows that he's fully dedicated to the well-beings of others around him, maybe selfishly. Well, except with Steiner, or as he calls him, Rusty. Shove him in a closet, it's fine. However, Zidane immediately recognizes that Vivi is a small being, frail child, delicate baby thing who needs to be protected, and one who's gonna need it real soon. We make our way through the forest to find Garnet when Zidane's friendly rival Blank shows up with the assist. He always kind of like had a weird design to me, being like covered in stitches and looking like he's wearing someone else's skin, but that's fine. Sometimes you just gotta wear other people's skin. You destroy the plant brain, which causes the evil forest to get big mad, and it attempts to petrify everything. Blank brought a map from the Tantalus detailing how to navigate the mist-stricken world outside, but he sacrifices himself in order to let the others escape. So like immediately, the cast gets stricken with sorrow and grief, and they're forced to work together and move forward, something that actively works its way into the gameplay. For example, some of Steiner's best attacks at this point can only be done in conjunction with Vivi, sword magic. Vivi basically catches Steiner's sword on fire or like ice, and then he does big damage. However, if they aren't in a party together, you obviously can't use that ability. So you're getting used to playing with Zidane, Garnet, Vivi, and Steiner, and right when you get used to the dynamic, they rip it away. While traveling through the ice cavern, the party's afflicted with a sleeping spell that knocks everybody out, leaving Zidane to wake up on his own and face Black Waltz 1, a beefy black mage sent by Queen Braun to retrieve Garnet. Why does it kind of look like Vivi? We'll get to that. Look at this ugly thing. It's disgusting. It's not the hardest boss in the game or anything, but it can be a wall for new players. You don't have heals from Garnet, you can't use Phoenix Downs because you're just by yourself, so good luck. You feel your party member's absence, not just by the fact that they aren't on screen, but by the sharp difficulty increase. The second Zidane starts to make new friends and have a dynamic with them, they're gone and he's forced to be alone. Some people hate this part because they feel it's unnecessarily difficult, but I feel like it fits with Zidane's character arc to a T. He doesn't even let the party know that anything happened because he doesn't want to freak out Vivi. Despite fighting to the death, Zidane keeps it to himself because he's only thinking about others. Goodest boy. Sometimes. When you leave the ice cavern, it's like the finale of a good episode of a TV show with a hopeful ending. We narrowly avoided danger, Garnet's like, I'm a dagger now, and the sun sets on a tough day. Roll credits. Each disc in Final Fantasy IX feels like its own season of a TV show or anime with different characters becoming the focal point. Despite being the main character and the one you control the most, Zidaane's major character arc doesn't really take place until the end of the game. You get little bits and pieces of it through everybody else's story, but they save him for last. However, you can get a decent glimpse at the conflict each character faces on the main menu, something a lot of people might have skipped. Zidane, virtue. You don't need a reason to help people. Vivi, sorrow. How do you prove that you exist? Steiner, dilemma. Must I spend my life in servitude? Garnet, devotion. Someday I will be queen, but I will always be myself. Freya, despair. To be forgotten is worse than death. Quina, indulgence. I do what I want, you have problem? Aiko, solitude. I don't want to be alone anymore. Amarant, arrogance. The only dependable thing about the future is uncertainty. All of these words are important. They're like the 7 deadly sins, but not at all, and more like, hey, Freya's real sad. But why? Press start to find out. Eventually. Game's like 60 hours long. It's thick. The episode that takes place immediately after the ice cavern is one that sets the tone for the rest of the entire game. At this point, we've already seen some pretty crazy stuff. Our party won't stop bickering and fighting, we just saw someone get petrified. So walking into the small village of Dali seems like a nice break for Zidane and company. Except you'd be completely wrong, you idiot! It's not uncommon for the peaceful looking village to have a dark secret, but the entire sequence of events in Dali is one that still hits hard to this day. Several things happen at the same time in this town thanks to the active time event system. Garnet's trying to learn how to speak with the commoner. Steiner, who super hates Zidane at this point, is attempting to find a way back to Alexandria and being overly pushy about it. He's also patient and helpful and kind of nice, so hey, look, character development, yay.
Onions have layers.
And you go to Vivi, who's staring at some farm, thinking he's hearing chocobo noises, when he gets kidnapped, shoved into a box where he cries for an undetermined amount of time before Zidane and friends finally come to the rescue. Then it's like, hey Vivi, look at all these lifeless dolls who look very similar to you, isn't that weird? And then Dagger is like, Oka-san. Let's not forget about the ATE that has the innkeeper talking about returning Vivi like a product. This helpless little baby boy goes through the ringer immediately, and right when you think it might get better, it doesn't. Black Waltz 2 comes out of nowhere and attacks, deepening Vivi's identity crisis. I thought it was clever that Dagger asks the player if they need to rest at the inn as Zidane sits there staring at a shaking Vivi. What you gonna make? What choice you gonna pick? Then when you're aboard an airship you're trying to hijack via Dagger's butt, Vivi sees a bunch of silent black mages who won't respond to anything he does. What happens next, in my opinion, is one of the most powerful moments in all of Final Fantasy. While trying to steer the ship towards Lindblum, a refugee for the party and where Dagger's uncle lives, the final Black Waltz, 3, comes down to attack. The most bloodthirsty of the bunch, it attempts to kill Vivi before the silent black mages stand in to protect him. Without exchanging a single word, Vivi comes to the realization that even if these things in front of him are just dolls, no matter what he might be, they understand him. They come from the same place. When we flip to the cutscene, which, by the way, oh god, I miss these, Black Waltz 3 erupts into a fury. All of the sound effects drop out, and we're giving a heart-wrenching, low-key piano and string instrumental while the black mages are knocked off the ship. Vivi only sits and watches while they fall, their striking yellow eyes fading from existence. Overcome with emotion, Vivi lashes out in anger and begins the following boss fight in a super powerful trance mode, and this fight isn't too difficult because of how powerful our little black mage is at the start. After the dust settles, Vivi's kinda just staring into the distance, unsure of what to do. But the situation is too complicated and emotional for one of our main characters to give some long-winded exposition about how everything's gonna be okay because they're unsure. Zidane's about to walk away, but turns around, pats him on the shoulder, and nods. I love this moment. It gets me emo every time. Despite the PlayStation 1's limited resources, despite the extremely unrealistic and cartoony look of this game, Final Fantasy IX told an extremely heavy story arc for one of its main characters, and we're barely 3 hours into the game. It's not even like going into all the other characters. We're learning that Zidane has a more serious side, that he might put on a face for others. Dagger decided she doesn't want to be some fictional princess in the tower and is taking charge for herself by learning new skills and steering an airship on her own free will. Steiner is beginning to question his loyalty to Queen Braun after witnessing all of the day's events. Whew, I'm gonna need a break after that. Thankfully, just about every moment in Final Fantasy IX is jam-packed with these character interactions. Typically with a lot of JRPGs from this time, and even some today, you'll like have your character story arc, and then they'll just kind of become a mindless drone in the background who might regurgitate things that sound like something they might say. But I'm happy to say, for the most part, this does not happen in 9. We'll come back to this, but for now, I want to get into the meat of everything, the gameplay. Like real deep.
Big deep.
Replaying Final Fantasy IX in 2019 was a really interesting experience. JRPGs have evolved a lot in the last 19 years. The turn-based battle system in something like Persona 5 moves at a lightning pace, while other franchises, including Final Fantasy, have moved on from it entirely. I don't think turn-based combat will ever fully disappear, as it's found an extended life in smaller budget, portable and mobile games, or Yakuza 7 for some reason, but I don't think we'll ever see anything as slowly paced as this ever again. Unlike most Final Fantasies, 9 is built around Zidane the Thief being in your party. By no means is this job a new thing to the franchise, but 9 practically requires you to have Zidane steal stuff. If you want to get that good gear early to have a fighting chance, you have to do it. Each character has a special command they can use, some more useful than others. Beyond Zidane's thievery, Garnet and Aiko are both white mage summoner combos. As you go through the game, you gain access to bigger and stronger Eidolons, each with longer and longer animations. It's actually chance-based whether or not you'll get the full animation, and you do more damage if it triggers. So if you're just trying to like quickly grind stuff out, there's a chance you're accidentally gonna trigger the nearly 2-minute long arc cutscene. Yeah, I try not to use summons. Vivi uses black magic, of course, no surprises there. Freya dragoons things up with her dragon magic and can jump off the screen for like a minute at a time. Queen of the Blue Mage can eat monsters and regurgitate their abilities. Steiner do combo with Vivi, and Amaranth throws things. He's alright. Some of these abilities are more useful than others. Heck, some of them can be downright broken, but that's pretty much all JRPGs from this time. You start out weak and pathetic, and then eventually your entire party is flying, auto-regenning health so quickly that you don't even need a healer, and you're hitting the damage cap every time. And you're not even max level. You get so strong that you can kill the super boss Ozma in like 4 minutes, and then the other hidden boss is like, oh wait, what? You killed Ozma? Dang, bro. While 7 has the materia system, 9 attaches certain abilities to sets of armor with an ability point requirement in order to fully unlock it. When you have the piece equipped, you can use it, but if you want it permanently on your dudes, you gotta grind out enemies to get the AP. Just about every spell or ability can be unlocked by synthesis or guild later in the game, but it's considerably harder if you do it that way. Not to mention, a lot of items are missable, so you might walk into another disc realizing, oh god, I didn't buy this item, now I can't unlock any of Vivi's top tier spells anymore. Whoops. So you have to take time to steal from all the monsters and bosses, grind out your AP for the best abilities, and generally don't get your butt kicked. There's not a clear guide in game as to what monster drops what items or what bosses have the equipment you're not gonna wanna miss, so you might be inclined to check out the strategy guide, but yeah, tough luck on that one, cause these guides sucked. For some reason, the Final Fantasy IX guide decided it was gonna hide most of the actual useful information on Play Online. Yeah, remember Play Online? The final boss of Final Fantasy XI, the online service that Squaresoft swore was gonna take off. I had an account with a bouncer avatar. Anyway, you'd open up this guide looking for info, and it would be like, oh, you wanna know how to do this thing? Enter this code on Play Online to find out how. They decided to gate some of the really cryptic puzzles and solutions behind Play Online, and that website's not around these days, so game FAQs it is. Imagine being like 10 years old and having this strategy guide, spending 60 to 70 hours unlocking everything you can, and then being like, okay, I want to get Steiner's ultimate weapon. And the guide's like, piss off, kid, look it up online. But you can't because mom won't stop playing Chip's challenge. Oh, I have to get to Hades in 12 hours? Guess I'll erase this file. Final Fantasy IX is filled with a ton of puzzles and different ways to obtain hidden items, some of which are pretty easy. But then you have things like chocographs and the friendly monsters. If you want to unlock the super boss Ozma, you have to go through the ringer. First, you need to complete the Chocobo Hot and Cold minigame, which is exactly as it sounds. Then you have to search the world using the chocographs to find at least 20 of the 24 hidden treasures via these tiny little screenshots and hints.
A tiny little box.
Some are doable and easy to understand, and others are like, what? Excuse me! By the way, this is where Garnet's ultimate weapon is. In the middle of the ocean. Some of the chests contain mystery gas, which will power up your chocobo with a big fat chocobo god, which will allow you to walk on mountains or fly, and then you have to find a tiny little dot on the map to fly into the air to the Chocobo Air Garden where you can fight Ozma, but you can't hit him. Nice. That's because you have to do the Friendly Monsters quest. A bunch of enemies in this game have friendly variants that you want to give items to, but finding their exact locations can be difficult considering this game's lack of a bestiary. Also, some of those items you have to give to the monsters are limited in number, so you might have soft-locked yourself out of it. But if you manage to reach the final friendly monster, the Yand, and give him a diamond, he's like, yay, you can hit the big guy now. Off, Ozma. My main point is that 9's gameplay is, at this point in time, a bit dated. If you're looking at just the raw speed of every single Final Fantasy, 9 might be the slowest. Anytime you select an attack, your character goes into a ready stance, which delays the action, similar to Final Fantasy VIII. A game like 7 or even 10 has a very quick selection to action speed, and that drags 9 down quite a bit in the gameplay department. I'm very thankful that the remaster has a speed up option, something Square Enix seems to completely understand and toss into every single port of this and all those other PlayStation era games at this point. These games were trying to take up all of your time because that's what people wanted back then. Some big ass 200-hour RPG. Games that don't respect your time, and oh boy, base Final Fantasy IX doesn't really respect your time. In the port, you can turn off the battle camera, which gives you back 5 or 6 seconds, but you're still left with 20 plus seconds of time from loading just gone. As much as I love Final Fantasy IX or any of the games from this era, the combat's kinda rough, and I don't think I could replay without having that speed up option. However, if this game ran at Final Fantasy VII combat speeds, I think it would be perfect.
You might be wondering to yourself, how can he like this game so much if he has so many issues with the gameplay? And the answer is simple: I'm not a child. What makes Final Fantasy IX so special is everything besides the combat. And that's not to say it's terrible, it's serviceable, but all of the other pieces, especially the narrative, weave together to create something uniquely beautiful and something that I think has stood the test of time. So I want to talk a lot about the little things.
Final Fantasy IX is filled with so many small details that really show off the human emotion in a way the series hadn't done before. When Clayra's on the verge of being attacked, like Burmecia, Freya and the other Burmecians perform this dance that is supposed to instill hope and reinvigorate the Sandstorm Shield. Visually, it might look goofy, but in the context of the situation, it gives off this desperate and hopeless vibe. In fact, everything with Freya and her estranged amnesiac lover, Freightly, is extremely depressing. It doesn't resolve itself even when the credits roll, and is instead something she has to deal with. Many of the characters have bittersweet endings, like Vivi, who's speaking to the player in the past tense, suggesting that like the other black mages, he deactivated shortly after the credits ended. But hey, at least Vivi had a bunch of kids, somehow? After her mother's death, the new queen of Alexandria, Dagger, decides to do something drastic to claim her own individuality as a person by cutting a ton of hair off. That scene's pretty emotional, and short hair Garnet is best Garnet, by the way. There's also Aiko and Mog's relationship. It seems to be a silly meme character for a while, but when Aiko's faced with danger, Mog reveals its true form as the Eidolon Medine. The scene gets me pretty good. Aiko always had a problem with loneliness, and that's part of her central character arc, but she always had people looking out for her the entire time, and Medine decides to sacrifice his Mog form knowing that the party is with her now. All of these examples and way more are great, great, but there's nothing quite like the parallels of Kuja and Zidane. Near the end of Disc 1, we're introduced to our main antagonist, Kuja. A rather naked design when compared to other series villains like Sephiroth or Kefka. Maybe at the first sight of his armored jockstrap you won't be too afraid, but watching him evolve over the game is fascinating. He goes from the evil influence in Queen Braun's ear to a psychopath hell-bent on ending all of existence to a scared child who only wanted to feel emotions. But how do we get there? So anyone seen that Dragon Ball Z movie, The Tree of Might? Wait, hold up, hear me out. While we have all these great character building episodes throughout the main game, our central conflict is very similar to that movie. An alien, Garland or Frieza, is hell-bent on destroying the planet of our main cast of characters. Garland comes from a different planet that is dead, Terra. He's an android tasked with the goal of reviving Terra by the means of fusing his planet into Gaia by stopping the flow of souls, which is kind of complicated, but basically bad man wants bad thing, kill all people. Since all life on Terra has ended, he created genomes, a race of humanoid husks as vessels for the souls that we're gonna yeet from Gaia. All genomes have tails, Zidane has a tail, nobody else does, see where I'm going? So Garland created Zidane and Kuja to become angels of death in order to end all life. One of them was real mad because he was created as an adult and never got to have a childhood, becoming a broody, edgy boy, and the other was dropped on his head or some shit and grew up a goober. So basically, Turles and Goku. Also, there's a big freaking tree, literally 1-to-1, checkmate. Anyways, Kuja was always aware of his purpose, but begins to defy Garland. Initially a puppet to his creator, he acts as an advisor to Queen Braun before turning her into a puppet hell-bent on extracting and utilizing the power of Eidolons, mainly through Garnet, who she had stolen from the village of Maiden Sari. Yeah, Garnet's adopted, and that doesn't pan out very well for the queen. The end of Disc 3 has everything come to an emotional climax. The party finds a way to reach Terra, where Zidane is immediately confronted by Mikoto, a genome who looks very curiously like him. This is one of Final Fantasy IX's several moments of exposition dropping because the reality and nature of the conflict changes vastly in each disc. But you don't need a reason to help people comes into play here. Having been so focused on those around him, never taking a moment to think about himself, Zidane is suddenly faced with a harsh new reality. That he isn't of his perceived homeworld, that he was created as an enemy to all of his new friends' existence. He sees these genomes walking around and suddenly has to face the same conflict that Vivi did. In Disc 2, Zidane takes Vivi to the Black Mage Village where all of the dolls are in hiding, most of which pondering their own existence. Similarly to Zidane, Vivi was created in a slightly different manner than his largely manufactured brethren, so he's been able to have somewhat of a childhood, even if he's just like 6 months old. Vivi goes through many tough nights, many of which accompanied by his new figurative brother Zidane and the rest of the party, and he's able to come out stronger on the other side. Zidane, however, never really lets other people take his emotional weight, and he completely breaks down in what might be one of the most emotional moments in Final Fantasy. His happy-go-lucky facade shuts down for a bit, and Zidane becomes angry, bitter. He calls Aiko and Vivi annoying children. He pushes everyone away as he continually refuses help. But with enough time and Dagger confronting him head on, he's able to snap out of it and accept other people's help for the first time in the game. Nobuo Uematsu's fantastic track, You're Not Alone, plays during this segment, and it's unforgettable. However, as a parallel, Kuja didn't get this support. Being the only genome in Terra with any kind of self-awareness, no one to rely on, and no childhood, he falls into despair and embraces hatred and loneliness. It's only when he's faced with the possibility of his own death that he embraces his mortality, gets woke, and transforms into Trance Kuja, a madman who not only destroys this man's career, but all of Terra.
Yeah, it escalates pretty quick.
All of this builds up to an exciting final battle that isn't actually the final battle. Whoops. After all, it's not Final Fantasy unless God itself decides to show up for no reason at the end to get its ass kicked. When you're about to defeat Trance Kuja in an emotional fit, he decides to pull an Andros and take you and the entire world down with him. So he casts Ultima again, and presumably you all die? You literally disappear in combat like an enemy would and end up in a place called the Hill of Despair, which might be a metaphor for purgatory, it's unclear. And then God pops down and is like, yo, what's up? I'ma end all of humanity, let's do it. Then you just pop him with your broken ass Freya. Easy. This is a shame because Kuja could have amounted to the same narrative point without throwing a naked Dr. Manhattan looking motherfucker at us. When I played this as a kid, I understood the point, but not really like why or how. But I picked up the Ultimania archive and it says that Necron was awakened by Kuja's fear, despair, and hatred. So basically, Trans Kuja yelled loud enough to bring God about. Okay then. It's not a major knock against the narrative, just more of a plot device for Kuja's final bit. Zidane now realizes that he shares a brotherly bond with Kuja, so despite everyone's warnings, he decides to go back to the Ilfa tree to find him. This is a super emotional scene, by the way, where Dagger and the others are reluctant to let him go by himself. There's even a nice touch where Steiner has finally grown to accept Zidane, and he turns a blind eye to the new queen of Alexandria and that boy she crushing on saying goodbye. But Zidane finds Kuja after a very awkward looking cutscene, beaten and bruised, moments away from death. This is where he finally accepts his existence, albeit a bit too late. But even though he put the entire party through hell and back, Zidane still finds it in his heart to give Kuja company as he passes away. Even after all of this, the entire game, Zidane doesn't need a reason to help people.
There's countless examples of these heartwarming and gut-wrenching moments in Final Fantasy IX. Too many to talk about in one video, as it would keep us here all day. So we're just gonna leave it at that. I did mention, however, I was gonna talk about Beatrix, and I totally forgot to write that in my script. So, eye patch girls are cool, even if they're war criminals who should be in prison? I think I've made it loud and clear as to why Final Fantasy IX is my favorite narrative in any video game. Well, maybe? We gotta move away from Square Enix month at some point. I got one more video for you guys coming in just a couple days. But like, just saying, if like at the end of the game when Zidane rips off his robes to reveal that it's him and he yells, "Bring my dagger to me," if you didn't burst into tears, you're not real. But yeah, I'm Austin, and thank you so much for sticking with me through this extra long Square Enix month. And that is my thesis as to why The Tree of Might is the best Dragon Ball Z movie.
Thank you all so much for watching. Special Patreon shout out to Alfredo Ariano, Brandon Howell, Christopher Olivia, Cliff Bro, Donald Dowdy, David Molnar, Eli Shane Stalfanekar, Flaming Fighter, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Irrational, Jay Roos, Josh Garbage Lord, Legend Gary, Nitron, Plasma Phoenix, and Vlad Lust. Thank you so much for watching. One more video for Square Enix double month, and then it'll be back to the rest of the year. You guys ready? I'm freaking stoked. But for real, thank you all so much for your support, and we got a lot of stuff coming up soon. See you next time.